Alrighty, y'all. Audio is tested. Hopefully, audio levels are set. Nobody needs to turn their volume all the way to max. But we are back for another podcast this season, season 4 of Scuttle. Previous season, we went by compounding interest, one of my favorites. But this season, we have a new team, a new allegiance, and a new name. And we're going with, maybe you weren't able to hear that drum roll, but the King's Gambit here. So welcome into season 4 of Scuttle, where we will be covering the Baron League. Covered Dragon League last season in compounding interest, have transitioned and made the glow up to Baron, so that's where we're going to be putting our focus. For those that were not around, what we look to do is dive into my team's series, their games. So this season will be for the Checkmates. Week 1 we played against the Catboys. After we go through the different games, the different drafts, just the series in general, we will be transitioning to look at the league as a whole. So get some just series thoughts, talk about the standings, talk about some of the key matchups from the week and some of the standout players. We'll transition into talking about just the overall league and where the projections look to go. We will be looking at Summit, utilizing the stats and the team of the season so far to really give some top players their kudos where it's deserved. I will give my own weekly MVP, regardless of statistics. No bias, of course. And we'll finalize with both my power rankings in a audio format, but also my following week predictions for how the matchups are going to go. So, without further ado, we will dive into the series in one moment. So, first things first, we're going to look at game 1 against the Catboys from the draft perspective. Let me see if I can pull that up. So this is what we looked like. Started on the blue side for the Checkmates, and specifically in this matchup, we knew Lulu was going to be a very highly contested pick between SideClick and Lunari. I think the biggest piece of this one is you have, no shade being thrown here, an off-roll AD, kind of unproven commodity, but then also an Enchanter support main on both sides, but specifically looking at the Lulu, just thought, hey, this can be first pick, very strong, not going to be punished, and we can look to scale. The second piece of the draft that I think played out very well was the early Ambessa flex. Specifically on blue side, this allowed us to ensure that only one of our solo lanes would end up getting counterpicked. Very important unless you're getting something super strong. And then another piece is we really expected to go into this series, into this game 1 draft, and seeing from both sides prioritizing AD junglers from the start. That's something that we've seen in Exibs and just in general. Memer 6 has been looking to lock in. They're just very strong. For myself, as a majority of my pool, it didn't play out that way. And instead, a lot of those AD bruiser junglers actually made it through to the second phase, got banned out, and we saw some additional just pinching of the pool, if you will. Gotta give a shout out to the penny pinchers. But in general, just wasn't exactly. But the Catboys still were able to round out, I think, their first through fourth picks very well. I think overall that Shen flex on 4, specifically with Fried Hour, from my understanding, does play that very well. Our anticipation was the Shen was top, but we knew it was a flex also. In general, I think what made or broke this game first was the Lulu piece from a draft perspective, but the second was the Swain top pick. To me, I understand the scaling piece of it, and I haven't looked into the statistics piece, but I feel like an Ambessa definitely has the opportunity from a percent health damage and just from an aggression damage has the chance to win that lane pretty well. But also when you have the Wei and the Unara that wants to be able to play that front to back, Ambessa just counters that in general. So you can just get your items, not have a lot of kill pressure put onto you, and as long as I did my job as a jungler to set Slippy up for success here, I think it planned out a-okay. So I was pretty happy walking away from this draft. Some game notes. A lot of the content around the Checkmates talked about just making sure we don't play too crazy. I think game 1 was an example where we really did. I would say a lot of myself, Slippy, and Boy with Apples played unlocked. And unfortunately for Boy with Apples, when you're playing Jinx, that gets punished a lot harder than when you're on a mobile Ambessa or a tank Malphite. There were so many plays where I thought, watching back, how the hell did Slippy or myself not die? And a lot of kudos go over to SideClick for that. I think a lot of credit is deserved there. I think in general, building on that, I'm going with J-Lo, by the way, for our mid laner. But J-Lo and SideClick, I think, executed skirmishes beautifully. I think the Malphite Ziggs combo played out very well. I think Lulu keeping the just disgusting plays Slippy and I were doing that should not have worked and we should have been punished harder alive, just planned out very well. Shifting over to the Catboys, I think Malfeasance or malfeasance, I want to make sure I pronounce that correctly, is going to carry from an artillery mage perspective, regardless what you allow them to play. That is going to be the way, the Victor, the Lux, and the Vagar mixed in as well. And it's really about figuring out from a draft perspective which of those is going to disrupt what you want to do the most as a team. We were able to navigate around that, but still, the way had so much pressure, picking up so many random kills, pumping out the damage. I built essentially straight MR. For the most part with my early items, and I was still getting shredded, so a lot of kudos there. Mid's going to be a real win condition for the Catboys, despite mid being a heavily or a strong pool across the league. I think the Lest Lunari lane went very well in lane specifically, and in general, I think the Lest AD shift is going to go pretty well. I think the absorb resources scale is exactly how he wanted to play jungle, and that style just transitioned so well over to AD. I think the problem for this roster, maybe just a specific matchup, is there wasn't a lot of map pressure created just in here by top and jungle, and if the Catboys want to succeed, that's going to be the main make or break each week. Looking into game 2, some of the pieces is, again, on the blue side, you put the AD jungler in the bag at this point. Wukong, one of the safest AD blindable junglers. That's going to happen. We were very shocked by the Aphelios. Cyclic mentioned this in the post-game interview. Just not something we expected to have in the bag, but I guess the pulse and coaching came in handy on this one to pull that out unexpectedly. The Gnar blind, I think, went very well for Slippy, something that was super comfortable and didn't go punished a lot, and I think a lot of that had to do with the jungle pressure. I mean, when we're flashing forward to get first blood and enable the Gnar, that's something that it was just unfortunate for Fried Arrow not to be really set up to execute on that counter pick. I think looking at the solo laners this game, Syndra, I think, is a good pick in general, but didn't necessarily have the draft around it to really hard carry. Same thing with the Fiora, so I think the usage of the double counter pick in the solo lane didn't go super well here, or as well as it could have. Again, just from the picks themselves, but also just from the supporting of the team. And I think for us, the biggest takeaway is on this blue side. The draft felt a little weird. The Xayah pick was, hopefully this will work out. It did. The Anivia pick, hopefully this worked out. It did. The Nautilus, we had a lot of debate over. Is that an Enchanter angle? Is that a tank engage? What do we go here? Even as we locked in Nautilus with 1 second left, I don't think most of us were super confident in it, and that wasn't for Cyclic's ability, just we didn't know what to plug and piece here, and that'll be something we develop and draft as the season goes on. Within the game 2 itself, I kind of shifted strategy to put more pressure top, especially now that Slippy was counterpicked a little bit harder, but had the comfort, know they can carry on Gnar, and it panned out very well to abuse that range matchup. There was some more kill pressure from our bot lane, specifically coming from the Nautilus, and I think that just skill discrepancy and just familiarity played to our favor. So I was able to put pressure top. Bot lane won naturally, and that was good to see. So we were able to play the map harder. I think the biggest miss on our end was our 2v2 skirmishes in mid. This was something I'm going to take on from a lack of shot calling, target selection, but also just knowing where we want to use our abilities and when. It's something we can get better, and it's nice that we know we have something in the draft, but also on the Rift that we can continue propelling as the season goes on. And again, just want to give a shout out to Malfeasance. I think is absolutely going to be a perma win condition. Not necessarily that they're going to bend anybody over in mid, but they just are so consistently good that opportunity is always going to be on the Rift and a draft. So it's really going to come down to, can Mimer empower that? But also, I think the bigger piece is not necessarily Mimer, but Lunari is, can they find effective roam timers that doesn't allow for less to get essentially focused in bot lane and sat too far behind, but still be able to get on the map and make that impact. And necessarily this was a sit and scale to death for the Catboys, and that's really not a fun place to be. But overall, I think they played well. Just some overall series thoughts. I think specifically we're going to continue to find opportunities as the checkmates to be punished with this aggressive play style. We played very sloppily, and I think in a lot of different matchups we walk out of here probably losing 1-2. Just from a matchup. I think drafts were fine, especially game 1. I was very happy with the masterpiece that we put together, but game 2 is something we got to really analyze and go moving forward. I think the one piece I want to talk about is for the checkmate specifically. A lot of the content talks about, is it going to be side click? Who is it going to be that really pulls on the reins? And I don't think that needs to happen. I think specifically in draft leagues, a lot of the teams that succeed early are the ones that can push the tempo, can dictate the map. and those that scale into playoffs are being able to find how do you refine that play style and just get punished less and less and less, but still keep that tempo. And I think that's something that we get to focus on. But I want to be very clear, there is no hitting the brake on this team. We will be hitting the gas, and you'll find me in your jungle. The second piece of this is from a overall Baron League thought. The Bonkers were able to win 2-1 over the Gunkers. I think you're going to hear it over and over and over in content pieces. This Bonkers draft was criminal, and they're by far, in a way, the favorites. I think Porkchop, Ubis, and Sherry are going to be able to do very, very, very well as a trio. I think overall, coming out of that, I personally felt a little spited to fall so far in the first round as a jungler, but I think it worked out in my favor in terms of I wasn't going to go to the Bonkers, but getting at that 7 to 8 turn I think is going to pay dividends. But regardless, the revenge tour is incoming. I think going back to the Gunkers themselves, and I put so much pressure on the jungle piece here, just didn't have a lot of pressure outside of top, and Sherry really took advantage of that, having those stronger lanes and really putting the map pressure across the board. I think for the Gunker specifically, playing around top and looking for additional vertical jungle opportunities probably is going to be the best way to win, and that's no shade on anybody on that team. On Gromp, walking away with a 2-1 victory over the Shadow Collective. For me, this was my series of the week. This was mostly in terms of competitive integrity. I thought this was going to be an absolute banger. I do think our series had more storylines and narrative, which plays for a good stream series. And coming into the players specifically, we know Breadwater is going to be deserving of all praise, but I wanted to give a shout out to Surav and Charmweaver. They played a great series, and for me, it's going to be the make or break for this on Gromp roster moving forward week in and week out. I talked about being that 7 to 8 turn as a jungler going to be a more advantageous spot than where Zebra was taken. I kind of had this conversation with Jakester and DMs. I think it might have been a little bit harder to find that skill level, specifically in the micro piece of it for the solo lanes if that fell through. And that's something that we were able to see. Zebra is going to have to do a lot of stretching before each series, a lot of carrying, but is absolutely a player that can do that. So I think that pick made a lot of sense there, despite Jakester breaking my heart. Would have loved to play with another Fizz main again. And finally, coming to the high stakes 2-1ing the Goblins. One hell of a game one from them. And this was something I haven't been able to watch their series, but just looking at the post-game screen, it really looks like this was an overall team effort, and that was awesome to see from this roster. I'm nervous specifically, and Verger's a great player, great person. Where I am concerned is the sit and scale mentality and philosophy that this roster was drafted for in Baron League, and it's not because it's just Baron versus Dragon. It's just the players in Baron themselves. These bot lanes are going to want to press the gas pedal, and that is going to be something that's going to translate into Dragon stacking, translate into mid laners having to play scared for the Goblins as well, and that's something that's not going to bode very well, specifically that mid lane piece with so much talent coming out of that pool. So for me, I think the biggest piece here is from a draft perspective, the Tarek Blitzcrank picks. I talked about the scaling ADs, but for me, looking in those specific support matchups, I think made the execution piece very hard, and especially early in the season, not a lot of familiarity. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So for me, I just think there's a couple of draft innuendos that didn't go very well, and there was limited reward to go to. So I think the other piece is giving Tiny Shoes Thresh on game 2 a little bit questionable, even into a Sivir. But I won't give Achilles too much credit either, so I just had to say his name. Looking at the team of the week for Scuttle, so we do have Porf. This is going to be expected, a very staple for the rest of the season. Held up to the hype and has to continue to be set up by their team. I think not necessarily to be on this list, but to translate that into wins for the rest of the season. This was my series where I had the lowest deaths probably for the rest of the season. Not expected to be up here for long. My play style doesn't translate to statistics essentially, but this is something that I know I'm going to have my wins and losses, both on the Rift and off, but I'm going to continue that play style for the team, and that'll ebb and flow. Breadwater, again, another staple. I don't expect this to change any week at all. Boy with Apples coming in, taking advantage of that passive lane I alluded to earlier, and ultimately was his worst enemy, specifically on the Jinx, trying to get a little hypey, but I really like that, and that was a sign of limit testing we want. I'm really excited. I think two of the best storylines in all of Baron League this season are going to be the mid matchups, but specifically the bot lane duo matchups as well. I think there's three, four, five different bot lane pairs that I'm really excited to see come out on a week to week basis. And finally, we have 21. Can you do something for me? Hyped to see him up here. I think the pair with Ubis was a fantastic landing spot for both of them. They're going to be mutually beneficial. I believe that is a symbiotic relationship, but really cool to see 21. Not really sure. Did they want to be in Baron? Did they want to be in Dragon to be up here at the end of week one? I love that. Ultimately, my week one MVP is going to go to Sherry. For me, created a win condition for the Bonkers. Despite all that lane pressure, Sherry was able to be a classic example of an aggressive jungler, utilizing that map pressure and execute it really well. Reaps the rewards here after creating one of the bigger internal matchup advantages that led to the victory for the Bonkers, who really needed this one. I think if they lost, not that it was unrecoverable, but I think that sets them up for the rest of the season to really hit the gas and go from there. My honorable mention for MVP or runner-up was Tiny Shoes. To me, I think specifically in that within their positional matchup, had the biggest edge. Absolutely stomped this week. Just ultimately the impact on the series, I think, was bigger for Sherry, but Tiny Shoes played out of their mind and from a gap really showed up this week. My rankings, power rankings. We don't need to look at the standings. We know the top two teams are going to be the Bonkers and On Grump, and if anybody puts it differently, they should be on the high stakes. Ironically, high stakes are going to be number 3 for me. I think this bot lane has the aptitude and the ability to carry any game, and I think the familiarity these two have. I would have loved to play with this roster, but in general, I think they are going to come out swinging, especially early in the season where they have that level of familiarity and able to run over some team fights as well. I'm going to put the checkmates fourth. I think this is a little bit controversial, and this is what power rankings for me mean. It's not going to be the same in the standings. Checkmates could go and lose the next 5 weeks. Hopefully, I'm going to knock on wood that that doesn't happen. But this is a team that, outside of, I think, Bonkers and On Grump, can consistently beat any team in the league, and that's the type of threat that gives you the 4 seed in a power ranking. Similar in that aspect, I'm going to put the Gunkers. I think overall this is something that the advantage in top lane specifically gives over an edge over anybody, and I think that is super important to play around if they can set that up correctly. In 6th, I'm going to put the Shadow Collective. This is a lot of pressure that's going to be on Zebra. Can they do it? I think so, and I think that's why I'm going to have them 6th, and they can really ebb and flow up and down the standings, but something to keep an eye out for. In 7th, I'm going to put the Catboys. I'm going to put the Catboys because I think the carry potential from mid is so strong, and I do think, despite all the, I think Less Force can do it. I think Less Force can play to be a win condition as well, and Lunari can play very well around that. To me, I think they can definitely take a series or 2, maybe even 3. I don't think consistently is going to be able to swing with some of the best, but I can see the win angles from there, and Memer 6 is always going to be able to support some of those carries, no pun intended. And then finally, I'm going to put the Ghoulblins 8th. I think for me, this is the team that I see the least consistent win conditions coming from, and that is where I don't ever see them going above 6th. They could rattle off 3 consecutive wins. I'm going to keep them 7th or 8th until they prove me wrong. So this is my challenge over to you. And finally, going to end off on my week 2 predictions. I'm going to have in order on the schedule. Let's pull that up. In week 2, I'm going to have the Bonkers 2-0 over the Ghoulblins, just based on my standings. I'm going to have high stakes 2-0ing the Catboys. Unfortunately, Malfeasance can't be the only win condition, and this is just a matchup where I can't put eggs in the Less Force basket. My next is going to be On Grump. 2-1 for the Gunkers. I think this is going to be an opportunity for Porf to go off at least one game, and that's going to translate. Bear could get tilted. This is one where I'm probably the least confident on. I do think Gunkers have the opportunity to win 2-1. Sorry, Bear, calling you out in this regard, but I'm going to go with On Grump and Breadwater here specifically, and Jungle Gym. And then finally, I'm going to predict a 2-1 Shadow Collective win. I think Zebra has my number. Zebra is my dad. And I'm going to need support from my team to get over that. Can it happen? Absolutely. This is where I think these last 2 series ultimately can be the absolute reverse, but I do expect to see at least 2-1 series go forth. So that is it for my first episode this season for the King's Gambit. Thank you for listening, and hopefully we continue to get some high tier content coming out to you this season. Have a great night and take care.